Are you ready for the great debate? We are live on the RTF Sports Network, and I am your host, Brandon Combs, and we have a great show lined up for you. But first, let's meet your panel. He is Matt mcPeek.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me on. Super excited about this. I am from the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. You can check us out Friday mornings at 12 o'clock as of right now, but I think in a couple weeks my time slot changes to 6 p.m. on the RTF network, and you can get the podcast anywhere you can get podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and I usually release by Thursday night, so you can check us out then. And it's usually just fantasy football, but this season I think we're going to get into a lot of the betting side of football, a lot of prop bets and whatnot. So definitely check us out when the football season comes back.
All right, and our next contestant is an RTF Sports blogger. He is Mike Fink.
Hello, everyone. I don't have a podcast. I feel like I should because everyone else on this network has one. But I write words for the blog. I'm basically one of the bigger writers there. So a lot of football, a lot of baseball. Mostly those are the two big ones, but the other sports also write about. So you can check out the blogs. They are coming basically on a daily basis at this point. So highly recommended to check out the blogs there.
And last but certainly not least, he needs no introduction. He is from Infinity Sports, Wayne G.
What's going on, everybody? Basically, this has become a staple, just having me on the show. But obviously, if you tuned into Infinity Sports right before the show, it was a great lead-in. If you're tuning in for Ronnie Fields, apologies again. I know there's some Chicago weather going on right now that's kind of postponing things. His video was really choppy. He kept breaking up and fading out. But he does want to come on the show. He is going to come on the show. I was really excited when I saw his face. It's like, I can't believe I'm talking to Ronnie Fields. But anyways, listen to the show Mondays and Wednesdays live on Facebook Live on our page or on the RTF's page, or you can download it immediately afterwards or listen streaming on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. on RTF.
All right, guys. So you guys know how this works. We're gonna go through about 4 topics. We'll see what we have time for at the end. Maybe we'll have to throw some bonuses in there for the fans out there who are tuning in to take a look at us. And so the first thing we wanted to get into was some hockey talk. And the first segment here, that the topic that we came up with was, and I lost it here, so just give me 1 second. Holy cow. So the NHL playoffs. The NHL playoffs. We have a great new format here. I personally love it. I don't know about you guys, but I love at 11 a.m. here in Chicago. I can turn on TV while I'm working from home, and I've got playoff hockey. Do you guys think that this should be the new format, Wayne G?
Yeah, it absolutely should be the new format. I mean, everybody seems to really like it. It gets more teams involved. I think in an ideal world, everybody would want to see every team in the league in almost like a NCAA single elimination playoff because it's exciting. That's why everyone watches March Madness, because they like that excitement of it could be all over. And what better in hockey than even a best of 7? You might as well have a best of 1 because anything can happen. You could have the worst team in the league. Their goalie gets hot and they run the table and win the whole thing. And I mean the 30th team. You never know. So the more teams you can get into the playoff or vying for the playoffs, I think the more exciting it is. And I think that people who love playoff NHL hockey will love this even more because they get more of it. I mean, that 8-game play-in or whatever you want to call it, that is more hockey they get to watch that is meaningful than the 80-game season. You're actually playing to get into the playoffs, and then you're playing for the playoffs. It's almost like a whole season of playoffs. So who doesn't like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Mike Fink?
Yeah, so I actually don't agree with that for two things come to mind. So the first problem is that there needs to be something sacred and something valuable about having a regular season. The regular season is set up with the idea, if you want to call it playoffs, where you separate the good teams from the bad teams. There is supposed to be value in 80 games, or in baseball, particularly 162 games. When we allow more teams in, we're basically saying the regular season doesn't matter. So what I don't understand is one of the things that is it takes away from that is the NBA allows half the teams in, and we see how devalued the regular season becomes because half the teams are in. So I think there needs to be some sacred value to getting into the playoffs. That's the first thing that comes to mind. The second, I think what people like about this format is the fact that there's games constantly around the clock, which shouldn't really be a thing exclusive to this year's playoffs compared to any playoffs. We have in the NHL 16 teams get in. They should give those 8 games that could happen in one day. You can put those from 12 to 12. So I think the NCAA March Madness, that makes more sense because there are more teams and you have to filter them out more effectively. But there needs to be some value to getting into the playoffs and some value to a regular season. There needs to be a reward for having a good regular season. So I think you need not less teams, but for sure less teams than what we have now in hockey, but less teams in general than what we have.
All right, Matt McPeek.
So, I don't think this format is good for the entire regular season. I think it only makes sense because of what's going on right now. To me, 24 teams out of a 31-team league getting into the playoffs, no shot. I think it waters down the playoffs too much. I hate that in basketball more than half the league makes the playoffs. This is even worse. Some of those first-round NBA playoff games are borderline unwatchable. You get the first seed versus the 8 seed, and the first seeds are just destroying them. Again, I get why the NHL did it this year. I think it's a good system for what's going on, but I like the older system better. I think, the top team from each division gets that number 1 seed. They get to host a playoff or a wild card team. And then you get the number 2 and the number 3 teams from each division playing each other. That builds rivalries. For the past 2 years, we've had the Bruins versus the Maple Leafs in the first round. That is what the NHL wants, right? You get 2 original 6 teams playing each other in the first round. Although I do think it's crazy that 16 of the 31 teams making the playoffs in the regular format, or the old format, I guess we can call it. Anything happens in the Stanley Cup playoffs. We saw it last year. Every wild card team won in the first round of the playoffs last year. And only one of those 4 wild card series even went to a 7-game series. So those wild card teams were hot and they were playing really well. In the East, we had the Columbus Blue Jackets friggin' swept the Tampa Bay Lightning. They were the best team in the league, President's Cup winner. Then we had the Hurricanes sweep the Islanders. So I think the NHL playoff format is just fine. The only thing I will say, though, is we're obviously looking at this from a fan's perspective, but you got to look at it from the league perspective. If you feel like keeping the 2020 playoff format will increase the viewers and draw more interest into the NHL, then I think that's what they're going to do. Unfortunately, right now, the NHL is at risk of being taken over by the MLS in some parts of the country as far as being, that number 4 sport. I think the NHL will kind of always be the number 4 sport, unfortunately, even in cities like Boston, Philly, New York, these teams that have 4 pro teams, and 1 in each major sport. Maybe not in cities like Washington, who've had the Wizards and the Washington football team just be absolutely atrocious over the past decade. But again, if the NHL feels like this 24-team format, round robin, and the 5-game qualifying series will get more interest and get more people watching the NHL in 2021, then I'm guessing that's what they're going to do.
But don't you guys think that they could keep that format and still, less teams, but keep the same format? I mean, I love this NCAA bracket where you're playing games all day long. From a viewership point of view, from a business point of view, it makes sense from all angles. So even if you're not really letting 24 teams in, I mean, you look at teams like the Chicago Blackhawks, who, as a Blackhawks fan, I thought that they were going to come out and be done in 3 games against Edmonton, and they shocked me even and came out and upset Edmonton. Now, granted, I get some teams have underperformed, and there was a long layoff, so there is some rust factor to all that. But everybody's playing on a level playing field. But after a full season, it doesn't mean you have to go to 24 teams. But what if these guys went to 12 teams and still ran the same format?
So who should Who's doing?
So again, I think having a smaller number of teams in the playoffs makes those playoff games more intense. I hear what you're saying about having games all day long and waking up and having games at 11 o'clock in the afternoon. But again, if the virus wasn't going on, I don't think the league would want that either. You want those games at prime time. You want people watching as much as you can. I agree that, it's different in college basketball because you have, 160 something D1 basketball teams. So I don't know if you can really take that same approach. Again, the regular season has to still mean something. And if you're just going to let more than half the league into the playoffs, then I think you're going to start seeing really bad regular season games. And I think you're going to see even more guys taking rest like we do in the NBA, where it's, every couple of nights, there's one of the stars on the team is sitting. I don't think it's good business, man.
I think
Mike, Fink, to your point where you had said something about, the NHL and having half the teams in there. You get the NHL. That how many times? I mean, just a couple years ago, we had an 8 seed win the cup.
Yeah, I think to add the NHL as a playoff it's one of the few leagues that you see a different regular season from a postseason, where the NHL, the Oilers basically looked uncompetitive, looked worse than the Blackhawks, and part of this is the NHL as a series is that goalies tend to carry, whereas in the regular season depth carries and a star player can carry you, where in the NHL playoffs star players tend to disappear because good defense takes them out. It's like a good wide receiver in the NFL. So hockey generally has more upsets. As a matter of fact, half the upsets in the qualifying series result in an upset. A lot of games result. But one of the things is that we want, there needs to be value to the regular season. I think hockey generally rewards it because there's something of trying or something of playing harder in hockey compared to basketball. I'm not compared, but the NHL, you don't reward teams on playing half well in a regular season. I mean, the system does that because a good goalie can carry you in the playoffs, and it has historically. But in general leagues, there needs to be a value to those 82 or 160 games, which you see.
Wayne G, coming into this debate, I really did not expect you to be my voice of reason when it came to this whole format and me loving it, but here we are. I mean, yes, obviously you need to have, some sort of a semblance with the regular season. It's got to mean something, and you could certainly still do that. You could still keep your 8 seeds from each conference, but still have this format, don't you think?
I 100% think so. And I think the thing that you guys aren't understanding is that it doesn't devalue the regular season to have more teams in the playoffs. Nobody cares about the regular season anyways. I mean, you're telling me that if you add, 20 teams to the playoffs, that somebody's say, oh man, now game 6 of 83 doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anyways. Nobody's watching that game, but they're watching the playoff games. So you can have a 160 game season like Major League Baseball does, and then you add 8 playoff teams like they did or whatever. And those playoff games are still going to get huge ratings because those are the games that matters. Game 83 isn't going to get ratings. Game 97 is not going to get ratings. Game 111 is not going to get ratings. All people care about is the playoffs. So the regular season doesn't matter to most people in any sport unless you're a diehard fan of that sport. So I say let as many teams in the playoffs as you can. The NCAA has 64, and they had to add more play-in games because people love watching it. The NFL could let every team into the playoffs, and every game matters in the NFL. We know that. But you could let every team into the playoffs, and every single NFL playoff game would get monster World Series type ratings.
Yeah, and Tom Brady and Drew Brees and all these great quarterbacks wouldn't play a single game in the regular season. They wouldn't play until the playoffs. So I hear what you guys are saying. The playoffs are great. If you want to add that whole, a 5-game play-in series for, let's say 9 through 12, and then limit it down to a normal 8-game playoff, I'm all for that. But 21 teams, it's just I think it takes away from the playoff games because, you know, you're watching a game and you go, well, this team has no shot because they're the number 18 seed playing a number 3 seed or something. I mean, maybe in hockey it is a little different, right? Because we see these upsets all the time. But again, I think the intensity of the Stanley Cup playoffs is because there's only 8 teams in each league that make it.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Brandon,
the fact that I had you guys on this show, and now you're making me agree with Wayne G, man, makes me want to invite you guys back.
I told you I'm not a hockey guy. I don't know what you want from me.
Mike, go ahead.
I don't know. I feel like you like the fact that there's games on around the clock more so. This is what's motivating you to want to keep this more than more.
Oh yeah, absolutely. To me, more hockey is better. For me, it's baseball, then hockey, then football, and then whatever that sport is where they dribble the ball and shoot it into a net. I don't even care about that one anymore. But yeah,
the NFL does have. I mean, granted, the games are on the weekends, but they have games starting at 1 o'clock, and they actually moved their games back on Sunday in the divisional round because of the primetime rating. But baseball also has every Friday and Monday of the wild card weekend of the wild card series has full slate of games.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
and it's great from a fan's perspective. It's great. And from a business perspective, it's great because those are the times that they're making a lot of money. Look at the NCAA when they go, and it's a great segue because that's our next, our next topic here. And not to get too far off track, but the NCAA, when they get to their NCAA tournament, I mean, how much money does that draw in just in that 3? I mean, if you had to do this every year and say you did it with basketball and with hockey too, and you got to fill out a bracket every year and play for money, you know how much this would generate, especially in like Vegas and stuff like that?
Well, for starters, I say the NCAA has more teams. So I would think of all the teams that don't make it, 64 is a reasonable number. I think the NHL and NBA can actually test out in a future season where they have games on at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and people pretend to be working in their offices but are really on their laptops watching the game. They could try it out. And I think if they see that more people are interested and more people are watching, which is what some people blame baseball for moving the World Series tonight because of that reason, that people used to like have some way of like ditching work to watch games. They could try it out. I think that could be a future solution for the first round where you get games on around the clock.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that necessarily needs more teams added, where college basketball has 64.
Maybe it's just me, but I would definitely love it. But anyway, so we're going to go ahead and move on. We're going to get to the NCAA here. Our next topic here is, should the NCAA allow players to sign endorsement deals? Matt McPeek, we will start with you.
All right. So I do think college athletes should be allowed to sign endorsement deals, but I don't think that they should be getting paid from the universities. I do think that the athletes who decide to leave school early should be able to go back and get a degree and not have to pay for it if they want to, especially if they had a scholarship. This whole conversation is mainly about basketball and football, right? So for guys that leave school early, they declare for the NBA or the NFL draft. And then, 3 to 5 years later, they're out of the league from, whether it's injuries, behavior issues, or just, not realizing the potential that they had that got them drafted. I'm up here in the Philadelphia area, so I'm probably going to get killed for it. But you look at Markelle Fultz as an example, played 1 year in Washington. He was drafted by the 76ers, and he's been one of the biggest busts of the decade. He's already made like $10 million, so I'm sure he'll be just fine. But, there's a lot of guys that leave school early. They go and a couple of years later, they're busts, and, they've made nothing. And, when they were in college, they might have been driving forces as to, why people were watching those games. So I don't think the guys should get flat out paid from the schools, but if people are tuning into games to watch a specific player and not the team, like Ja Morant last year with Murray State, those guys should be allowed to sign a deal, make some money for themselves, for their families while they're still in college. A good amount of these college kids, they come from nothing, man. And I think allowing them to make a little bit of money off of their likeness is a hell of a lot better than seeing what happened to Louisville, for example, last year with the recruits, having sex with hookers on the university's dime. But you can't have the schools paying the athletes flat out. There's just too many issues that would come from that. American colleges are super liberal. So you'll have some people complaining about the women's lacrosse team not getting paid the same as the football team, or the women's basketball team not getting paid as much as the men's basketball team. So I think if we saw college athletes getting paid, you'd see the NBA get rid of the 1 year removed from high school rule, and you'd have some high profile college players, and the NBA and college would be kind of competing for that talent. It would mess up the draft. It would drain the player pool for the G League. It would just be a mess, man. So I'm not for paying the athletes, but I am all for letting them get endorsement deals and making some money off of them being great athletes.
All right, Mike Fink.
So I've actually gone back and forth numerous times on this argument. I've heard all the arguments, and as I make this argument, I'm currently being unpaid by a website for the content I produce. So I really don't know that there's multiple routes to go with this, and there's like different like perspectives when you think about it. Every college basically takes advantage of students. They use the students' likeness. The students make the college, and they basically don't give credit to the students. And you really have to ask yourself, what is the value of going to college? What is the value of what do the students get back in payment? And of course, you hear Nick Saban always advocate, we give the players free tutoring and free education, and if we give them free room and board and a free ride at Alabama, which would have cost someone else $50,000. You hear these arguments that they basically are paying for them, even though they're not. At the same time, the players, this is especially when it comes to football and basketball, this is a sport that this is a league. This is a place that is in a sport that doesn't have good security. You want to have that security. You want to have that insurance. There isn't that insurance. You get injured, and the injury in college football, if you're a high school athlete, we've heard these stories. You get injured, you get your scholarship revoked. They will do that. They've done it. There isn't that security. The problem that I have is that people don't realize how few athletes are millionaire athletes. Because, and you think about it, there are very few athletes that one make the pros. They're 0.01% make the pros. Two, very few athletes are brand names in college. It's part of the system that they minimize the athletes. But I think about college football. In the past 20 years, there's only been 3 or 4 football players that were national names that you heard about them, like Tim Tebow, Reggie Bush, Johnny Manziel, and you probably maybe could put someone like Trevor Lawrence now because of how hyped he is and how nationally relevant he is. But in the end, college football minimizes a lot of college football. There is even college basketball, because these guys are only there for a year. By the time you heard Zion Williamson's name, he was getting drafted basically, and he was the biggest name out there. Ben Simmons. By the time you heard of Ben Simmons, he was out of LSU. He had no interest in being there.
Wayne G, what do you say? Pay these guys or what?
So first of all, yes, pay them for endorsements, because it is their likeness and it is their face. And if they want to get money for it, they should be allowed to get money for it. Why should the university be the only one that benefits from the likeness of a player? That doesn't make any sense. It's typical, greedy universities. But for them, as far as paying the players to go there, I think they should pay the players to go to the universities as well. And I think you don't have to do it necessarily like the NBA, where guys get $1 million to go to Alabama or whatnot. But what you do is you take the cost of their education. How many times do you hear somebody say, well, these guys get a free education, that's what they get paid? Okay, give them the cost of tuition. Give them the $50,000 a year that it costs for tuition. Now, if they want to use that money to take classes and get their degree, right on. Good for them. They can use that money and take classes and get their degree. But if they want to use that money to buy an Xbox and a 70-inch TV and live live off campus, they can do that too. Basically, you're making money off them. That $50,000 scholarship every year that you're giving them is money that you are getting from them, and it's a fraction of what you're getting from them. So just give it to them and let them do what they want. If they want to take classes, let them take classes. I hate the idea of a student athlete. It doesn't exist. It's not real. They're athletes. So either pay them to play there by giving them their tuition money, or don't have them go there. I mean, they'll go. I'd go play at Harvard for $125,000 a year.
I mean, the problem with that, I hear that and I agree with that. The only problem I have is that if we get rid of the scholarship system and we say like we'll pay players, this could backfire potentially on the players, where the colleges say, all right, we are only going to pay the top recruits, and if you're not a top recruit, we won't pay you, and on top of that, we won't give you a scholarship ride. And the problem is that this system benefits most of those guys that go to a Harvard or go to a Cornell, or not even those, go to like a random college, like, I don't know, a college that you're not going to make it to the pros, like Michigan State, or even in Indiana. I said Michigan State, whatever. They send Le'Veon Bell. The point is that this benefits those players that aren't going to be pros, that are getting a free ride with all the benefits. I think you should pay them, and you could pay them. The problem, especially with the TV deals and the $17 billion, and Nick Saban's making more money than any president in any university, but it has the potential to backfire against those guys that are playing college football throughout their even high school career, with the idea of, I can get into a college I wouldn't have been able to get into and get that boost in life or career. That's my big fear with this idea of we pay them, because it's going to end up hurting a lot more people than it will help.
Yeah, what do you say, Matt?
Yeah, I hear that it's not a bad idea as far as paying the players whatever a year's worth of tuition costs them, but I think you have to kind of look at the smaller schools and take into consideration the guys that are playing at a University of Chicago Loyola or let's say St. Joe's or St. John's, compared to Duke and North Carolina. The guys that are going to get recruited to those big schools, if you're going to pay them, no one's going to be going to these smaller schools anymore, and that takes away from the whole beauty of a 64 team tournament at the end of the season. And again, you can make this argument for football and basketball players, but there's a hell of a lot more collegiate sports than just basketball and football, and if you open that door, it's going to open up the floodgate, and everybody's going to be coming looking for their cut. And I just don't see the schools ever agreeing to it. I think eventually they're gonna have their hands tied behind their back, and they're gonna have to give these kids the ability to make some money off of their name. But
yeah, I definitely think you're right there. I don't ever
happen.
see the schools agreeing to it. I mean, because they would lose out on money. But I mean, they absolutely should allow it. That's for sure. So
Yeah.
We're going to go into the next subject, which we're going to get some NFL talk, which is closer to Matt mcPeek and Mike Fink's area of expertise. So we'll see if these guys can come back and make a move on Wayne G. Can't let him win this one, guys. Can't do it. All right. So going into the 2020 season, who is the most overrated quarterback and the most underrated quarterback? Mike Fink?
All right. So there's a few underrated quarterbacks. One of of course, the three that I'm thinking of are the three rookies taken in the first round, where we haven't seen rookies make such an impact since Andrew Luck, RG3, Russell Wilson, when those three all made the playoffs in the rookie season. In terms of one, if I had to pick one underrated quarterback, I mean, I've compiled the rankings and of everyone's rankings on RTF to make our top 5 list. One of the names that didn't get mentioned a lot was Deshaun Watson, who constantly bails out Bill O'Brien as a bad coach. Overrated quarterbacks. One of them that I think of is Kyler Murray. I don't know why people like love him now. You got DeAndre Hopkins. People think he won the Rookie of the Year. I think he won Rookie of the Year, honestly, because there was a lack of offensive production from that draft class. Josh Jacobs is good. There's a few good receivers, but overall, it was just a bad offensive class. But people love Kyler Murray. I don't see it. I don't think the Cardinals are going to be that good this year. I don't think Kyler Murray is that good. He's been in an air raid system that has helped his stats, but he's not a winning quarterback. Other overrated, I might say that Tom Brady is getting a more overrated because he didn't have good the past 2 years in Tampa and in New England. He did not play well, and all of a sudden he goes to Tampa. Everyone loves him, and he's getting Gronk, and he's got all these weapons, and he hasn't played yet. We really have to see what happens. Is Tom Brady
about to play with the best wide receiving core he's ever had?
Yeah, everyone's giving him a lot for the weapons he has. His O-line is still not good. They drafted Tristan Wirfs in the first round. Hopefully that's going to fix the O-line. And of course, Jameis Winston looked awful. So with the weapons he had, so granted, it's Tom Brady's going to do better, but Tom Brady did not look good in those last 2 years in New England, and it looked like Bill Belichick was winning to try to make do with what he had. Tom Brady, of course, can win a Super Bowl this year, but everyone's putting the Bucs ahead of the Saints. Everyone's putting the Bucs like in the Super Bowl, and I don't know. And people, it's hard to assume that when Tom Brady doesn't look mobile like he used to in his younger years. He's missed some throws. It might be he's one of those overrated guys also.
All right, Wayne G, who you got? Wayne G, we got no sound from you, bud.
Sorry about that. With the Tom Brady, basically that stole my thunder a little bit because I do think that he is a little bit overrated, and that kills me to say it as a New England fan. I mean, I'm a diehard New England fan, but the fact of the matter is I watched every game he played last year, and anytime he throws the ball over 15 yards, his shoulders go at a 45-degree angle because he has no arm strength. So it's like, what's good having a 6'6" receiver that can go 40 yards down the field if you can't throw it 40 yards down the field? So it's incredibly hard there, I think, for him. For me, I know it's not my rebuttal round per se, but the reason that everyone's high on Kyler Murray is because he might have the best arm in the NFL. I mean, he's basically Russell Wilson with a cannon. So he's smart. He knows when to run. For me, the most overrated quarterback this year has got to be Josh Allen. People love Josh Allen this year because now that Tom Brady's out of the AFC East, everyone thinks he's the next coming, right? But he's not. The guy completed 58% of his passes last year. It's one of the worst in the NFL for a starter. So I know he ran for like 400 yards, which is fewer than Kyler Murray, but he's got a great arm. He's got an electric arm, one of the best I've ever seen, but he can't hit a receiver in the hands to save his life. So for me, he's my most underrated. It's going to be Derek Carr. The guy completed 70% of his passes last year and threw for over 4,000 yards and had 20 touchdowns to like 8 interceptions. So the guy is accurate. He hits guys in the hands. If you go by his completed or his the PFF stats of passes that should have been caught, he'd have like an 81% completion rate. He's might be the most accurate passer in the league, and he's got a good arm, and he can throw it downfield, and he threw for a lot of yards last year. I think he was top 10 yards, and his touchdown to interception ratio is good. So I think Derek Carr doesn't get the respect he deserves. He's my most underrated, most overrated, along with Tom Brady, Josh Allen.
All right, Matt McPeek, who you got?
All right, so first of all, Kyler Murray is an amazing talent, and with the weapons that he has around him this year, he's going to do special things. I think Josh Allen is going to be awesome this year with Stephon Diggs there as well. But I'm going to start with my most underrated, and it's Gardner Minshew. So the dude has a pretty solid rookie year last year on a horrible Jaguars team. I think he has one of the most underrated receiving cores with DJ Shark, D.D. Westbrook, Keelan Cole, and the rookie who I'm really excited about, especially in this offense, Laviska Shenault. They brought in Tyler
shit out of COVID-19.
He sure did. They brought in Tyler Eifert, who is definitely past his prime and has had a rough time staying healthy, but there's no denying he's a big red zone threat. I think the Jaguars have declined the 5th-year option on Leonard Fournette, so they're going to run his ass into the ground like the Cowboys did with DeMarco Murray. Their offensive line is one of the only offensive lines in the league this year that's going to be returning all 5 guys, which I think is going to be huge in this season with the lack of training camp and the no preseason. Plus, they're probably going to have the youngest defense in the league, which means a lot of high-scoring games. The Jags traded away Nick Foles for a 4th-round pick this offseason, which tells me that they're confident in Gardner Minshew. And on top of that, the dude has a legit mustache. So I'm going with Minshew as my most underrated. My most overrated quarterback is Jared Goff. The dude just got $134 million contract extension this offseason. Both of Goff's good years came when Todd Gurley was, scoring 19 or 20 touchdowns a year, 1,600 total yards. The guy needs everything around him to be perfect. The offensive line has to be good because he can't really move around the pocket all that well, and he's terrible when it comes to throwing with pressure in his face. You need to establish that run because so much of his game and the Rams offense is predicated off of the play action. You have to have a really good defense too, because he showed in that Monday night game against the Chiefs in 2018 that he couldn't win a shootout without his defense scoring 2 touchdowns. So the Rams got lucky that in that game against the Chiefs, they were the worst team in the league at defending tight ends. They gave up 2 touchdowns late to Gerald Everett. So Jared Goff to me is not worth it. And I think we're going to see it again this year, that when you don't have the top rushing team in the league, he's just a very average quarterback. I think you can't underestimate the rushing that Jared Allen can give you. I tend to look at things from a fantasy perspective, which usually is not, the way to go when you're talking just straight football. But, his ability to pick up a first down and also be able to throw the ball 80 yards is something that there's only a couple guys in the league that can do that. And I think Jared Allen is going to be awesome this year.
Yeah, I mean, you guys got some interesting picks there for sure. Mike Fink and Wayne G, though, the most winningest quarterback in the last 20 years, and he's about to go play with the best receiving core he's ever played with, and you guys have him as overrated. I don't get it. But,
well, I don't think we're saying like what he's going to do this year. I think we're saying, what his ability level is as a player.
Like, also consider right now
where he as a player, right?
What he's done is the greatest of all time. Nobody's going to, pretend, but some people say not, but like the greatest of all time. Nobody's going to disagree with that. Everyone's saying that he's still a top 5 quarterback, and simply, he doesn't need to be a top 5 quarterback to win with the Bucs, but to say that he still is just, it's hard to say. And I would disagree with that.
See, I've been one to say that Tom Brady, until the day that he dies, not the day he retires, but the day that he dies, is the greatest quarterback in the NFL.
I'm a Jets fan, and I'm more than willing to admit that Tom Brady is the best quarterback of all time. And I think we just saw it a couple years ago with Peyton Manning in Denver, how horrible Peyton Manning was that year. And he was able to bring that team to the Super Bowl. I think Tom Brady has a hell of a lot more left in his arm than Peyton Manning did that year. And that offense is going to be awesome with him and those receivers, that group of tight ends they have, the running backs. They're going to be great, man.
All right, well, let's get into something that we could all definitely agree is probably the best sport out there, and that's some baseball. Right, guys?
Oh, yeah.
Man, lively.
I got the Mets game on right here. I got the Phillies game on over here. I can't get enough baseball.
That Mets game is nuts right now. They're down 12-0.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it.
Does Major League Baseball need a salary cap to create more parity? Wayne G?
They do need a salary cap to create more parity. I think that we talked about it earlier, that their 162 game season doesn't matter to anybody. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that your top 8 teams every single year without any sort of difference. The NFL has it right. They've got a hard salary cap, hard floor, and they have a ton of parity. So a team wins the Super Bowl, they go 4-12, they make it to the championship game, then they go 1-15. And it's just, that's the way the league is designed, because it's just tons of parity. You give up Major League Baseball a salary cap and a salary floor, which, by the way, the players I think would be all for. The owners would hate it, because it means that they would have to revenue share in order to make it work. And they aren't doing that. There's no way the Steinbrenners are giving money to the Red Sox, to help revenue share. But that's the only way it works. And you have a floor and you have a ceiling. And then you start seeing some of these players like Aaron Judge or Giancarlo Stanton or Mike Trout or whatever it is, when they come up, only a team could only sign one of those guys or two of those guys, and then the rest of them have to be spread out amongst the rest of the league. And I think that people would be more interested in baseball. We talked about younger viewers last week. People would be more interested if you had a team that could win it every single year or go, last place every single year, and you don't know until the season starts and you get about halfway through. People love that. That's what makes regular season games count.
Matt McPeek?
So this is a tough one for me because I do hate seeing the Yankees sign top free agents every single year. Garrett Cole this past year, DJ LeMahieu in 2019, Aroldis Chapman in 2017. That deal was ridiculous. They traded him to the Cubs, and then 2 months later they sign him. But here's a payroll stat that is just absolutely insane to me. In 2019, the Red Sox and the Yankees each had a higher opening day payroll than the Rays, Orioles, and Blue Jays combined. But the Red Sox had the highest total payroll in 2019. They missed the playoffs. The Cubs had the highest payroll in their division. They missed the playoffs. 6 of the top 10 teams in total payroll last year missed the playoffs. So 3 of those top 10 teams finished at 500 or lower. That's the Phillies, the Giants, and the Angels. So having a top payroll does not mean that you're automatically going to win. Look at Giancarlo Stanton yesterday. The Yankees give him $1 billion, and he's back on the IL for the 50th time since becoming a Yankee. The Jacoby Ellsbury deal was a massive flop. You can't buy wins as much as these general managers would like to think they can. You could pay these guys all you want, but they still got to go out there and play. In the last 10 World Series, the number 1 team in payroll only played in 3 of them. 4 of the 10 American League teams were in the bottom half of the league in total payroll. So, and to be honest, the luxury tax has been working. In 2016, there was 6 teams that were taxed for going over the threshold. Since then, only 2 teams have been taxed, the Red Sox and the Nationals. And also, let's face it, boys, a salary cap it's never going to happen in baseball. The Major League Baseball Players Association would never call for it because that means that they'd be making less money as a whole. And the owners are never going to bring it up during a bargaining dispute because the teams at the bottom are making so much money from the profit sharing and from the payouts from the luxury taxes. I don't think we're ever going to see a salary cap in baseball. It's interesting. I forget which one of you guys brought it up. I'm sorry, but the salary cap in the NFL and how much parity it creates. But you look at the NFL, how many dynasties have come out of the NFL? We had the Cowboys in the 70s the Cowboys and the Steelers from the 70s, the 49ers in the 80s, the Patriots for the past 20 years. Yes, they do have a salary cap, but it's just not the same. And the amount of money that the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Dodgers make compared to the Pirates and the Brewers is not the same gap as it is between the high market teams in the NFL compared to the low market teams. So it's just not the same. And I don't think we're ever going to see a salary cap in baseball.
Mike Fink?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Matt brought up a good point with it's easy to forget about the luxury tax because it's such a powerful tool that the MLB uses, and it basically adds equality. We mentioned earlier how hockey has the format of hockey, the system of hockey basically creates upsets. Baseball, the way baseball basically created, forms a lot of, you have more parity in baseball than you do in the NFL and the NBA. You have in baseball in the 1980s, 9 different teams won a World Series. And in this past decade, we saw Boston win 2 World Series and we saw the Giants win early on, but you see small market teams like the Royals who win World Series. A salary cap isn't what's needed. I think what we need to do is lower the luxury tax number. We also, the irony is with salary caps is that the NBA brought in the whole salary cap thing to protect the small market team, and the team that got destroyed was Oklahoma City. They lost all their players, and players joined super teams anyway. I think I would say just lower the luxury tax number, to force teams not to make it force teams to either A, make more signings but have to pay the luxury tax, or B, have to go below the tax but do with their signings. The irony, I mean, I also think that the irony was bringing this topic up to say create more parity is that baseball's golden age was the 1950s when the Yankees were winning the World Series every year. Sports, ironically, is good when there's a villain, when everyone can root for or against that villain. So the Yankees were that villain in the 50s. Pete Rozelle, when he became the commissioner of the NFL, wanted his Yankees, and he got him with the Packers, and then he got him with the Steelers, and recently with the Patriots have been the villain, and slowly but surely to the fact that everyone will be watching like that team because they want to root for them or against them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, Matt mcPeek brought up a great point. I don't think that, you don't have parity in baseball right now as it is. And I think that, with I think bringing the luxury tax down, like Mike Fink says, is the way to go. I don't think that a salary cap is the way to go. But I do think that you don't have to be a big market team to be able to win. And the Tampa Bay Rays have shown that. The Kansas City Royals have shown that. So I don't know, Wayne, what about you?
Yeah, I think that you can win as a small market team, but it's more difficult because you have to have all that homegrown talent, and you're not basically because you're trading away all of your great players for more young players to grow in your farm system. That's how they get to be that good, because they traded away all their superstars because they can't afford them. Now, I think the problem is when people hear cap, that's all they hear. Caps come with floors. So the problem is we talk about how the players would make less if there was a salary cap. They'd all make more. That's the big myth. The owners want you to think, they want the players to think they would make less with the cap. They'd actually make more. And the reason is because of collective bargaining. How much do the NFL players make? 55% of league revenue. NBA players get 50% of league revenue. NHL players get 50% of league revenue. Major League Baseball, 31% of league revenue. So if you have a floor and a cap and players go to 50% of league revenue in this floor and cap and revenue sharing program, everybody gets a bump. Mike Trout gets a raise. Everybody gets a raise because the floor goes up. That means that a team like Tampa Bay has to spend $160 million or $135 or whatever you deem the floor to be, but they can't spend over a certain amount. Now, Fink brought up the point that the NBA, it didn't work because the NBA has a soft salary cap. Their salary cap is like $90 million and the Lakers payroll is 290 or something because they just pay a luxury tax. Well, with the NFL, the reason it works is because it's a hard salary cap. You can't go over it. There is no luxury tax. You just cannot go over it. The league will not allow you to sign somebody to go over the cap. And it does create parity. And I understand that the New England Patriots have been an anomaly. The league is not designed to be that way, which is why everyone accuses them of cheating all the time, no matter what it is. Oh, look, they went to practice early. That's cheating. Because there has to be some explanation other than the fact that Bill Belichick's a genius and Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time as to why they've had such a string of dominance. But that's why. It has nothing to do with the cap. They're an anomaly. The cap's not supposed to make them a winner. And when you bring up teams like the 49ers and the Steelers and the Cowboys of old, they didn't have a cap or they didn't have free agency. I mean, you forget Reggie White was the first really big free agent, and that was like 1997. So it's still relatively new. Free agency and the cap are designed to have parity. The NFL has great parity with the exception of the Patriots because they have the most brilliant GM/coach of all time.
I mean, but to that point, we can potentially be seeing the Chiefs because Patrick Mahomes is doing stuff that nobody's ever done, and Andy Reid has always been a great offensive genius. Do that. I agree, Wayne, what you said about raising the floor, because baseball's crisis right now in terms of their payroll, in terms of players complaining, is the qualifying offer has not increased the same way it has increased in other leagues. The qualifying offer has only gone up from 17.1 million in 2016 to 17.9 in 2020. So we do need to increase the floor minimum spending that you give to players. But at the same time, one of the big problems is the salary cap isn't what's hurting. Is baseball, what's hurting the small market teams nowadays is that the big market teams are now investing and are now winning in minor league systems. They're putting all that money into farm systems. And it's hard to say if you could put a salary cap on the farm systems when that's where the teams are investing. You talk about the Astros with the whole cheating. I mean, aside from the cheating scandal, one of the things that they were winning in was the technology game. They were winning they were winning by investing in the technology game. So the big market teams now aren't spending on players, but they're spending on assets. I don't know where you could put a cap on that.
Investing in technology like the Astros, or
Driveline in Seattle or wherever that is in Washington.
If everybody wants to invest in technology to cheat, then I guess that's what they'll do. But investing in little buzzers to tell you when the ball is going to be a fastball, to me, you're not watching sports anymore. It's not competition. You guys keep talking about floors, and with a salary cap, but you can't compare the Yankees to the Tampa Bay Rays. You can't tell the Tampa Bay Rays, hey, you have to spend $120 million, because they don't have $120 million to spend. You can't tell the Pittsburgh Pirates that they have to spend the same as the Cardinals and the Cubs, because they just don't have the same amount of funds. They don't have the market to pull that money from. The salary cap, in baseball, yes, it sucks because there is such a huge gap between the top teams and the bottom teams. But telling teams that they have to spend a certain amount, it can't work. It just won't work.
Well, I mean, it would if the teams got more money to begin with.
Well, I was saying that it would work because you'd have revenue sharing. That's why I said the owners won't go for it, because the Yankees would be funding the Pirates' payroll, and the Red Sox
already have revenue sharing. The revenue sharing has been going on for over 10 years, and it's working. These lower market teams. I think I saw the Yankees have paid over $300-something million over the past couple of years towards all these other teams. The revenue sharing is already working. It's not like that's going to triple or quadruple in time enough to make it okay to make these other lower market teams be able to compete. Baseball is the way it is. Honestly, one of the things I love about the whole structure of baseball pay is that it kind of is a microcosm of American capitalism. Is that if you want to compete, then hire better people in marketing, draw more fans to your stadium, make some more money. The fact that the Tampa Bay Rays made the playoffs and they couldn't sell out their stadium, that's pathetic to me. Move the team to a city that wants some professional sports, and maybe we won't have these issues. Yes, the Yankees and the Red Sox have such a major advantage when it comes to paying players, but we also see way more busts as far as free agent signings from these big teams than we do from these smaller teams.
All right, go Wayne.
Well, I was just going to say that, I mean, that the main thing is that I think that we're misunderstanding that the floor and the cap evens it out. Now, you're saying that the money's not there for those teams. What I'm saying is that Major League Baseball makes $10 billion a year, regardless of whether or not the Tampa Bay Rays sell a single ticket. They make $10 billion whether or not the Red Sox sell a single ticket. So what I'm saying is take that $10 billion, divide it by 30, and then give half of it to the players. It's simple math. You don't really need to have fans or not.
I think people don't give enough credit to how effective the luxury tax is. Boston won a World Series a few years ago when they had the highest payroll, and we look at them now. They had to trade Mookie Betts. They had to get rid of David Price. They had to get rid of all those players, and they're a hot mess right now. And people don't give enough credit to the luxury tax for what it does. The Dodgers currently are way above the luxury tax, and they are burning billions just by trying to win a World Series, and they still fail. When they finally win that World Series, you can write it down that they're going to blow it up, because they won't be able to. They'll eventually say, we can't do this because it's too much. They're way over the luxury tax.
I see the same thing happening here in Chicago too with the Cubs. I mean, at some point here, they're not going to be able to afford all this homegrown talent that we have. They've got guys coming up like a Javier Baez, Kris Bryant. They just did re-sign Wilson Contreras and Anthony Rizzo, but you've got guys that are homegrown talent that they're not going to be able to afford to hang on to. So Kris Bryant's probably gone and all that. So just because you keep homegrown talent doesn't mean that you're ultimately going to be able to keep them.
on the note, the Chicago Cubs are a good example of how the big market teams are beating the system, because they were able to trade away a Gleyber Torres because they invested in their minor league system. Theo Epstein basically said, I have enough prospects where I can bring in I'm investing in that area, which doesn't have these luxury tax issues, which doesn't have those problems.
Well,
so he did the same thing in Boston too.
Yeah. And that was a great trade in the moment because it brought him a World Series. But now, if it hadn't been 108 years since a World Series, they probably don't make that trade, and they keep Gleyber, and then you have Gleyber and Javi up the middle. But I think that was more of a, hey, look, we've got a window here. We've got a real shot here. We need a closer. Let's go get the best closer in the game at the time.
And I think the trade deadline is still going to do that, where you're going to have these big market teams make that one move, and then after maybe have to blow it up because of the luxury tax and because of all these issues. I think it's good. I always, with the Gleyber Torres thing, as a Yankees fan, I always think about the there was a rumor that Jacob deGrom could have been traded for Gleyber Torres, and I always think about that. Like, they could have had a Cy Young pitcher in their rotation to win a World Series. It's part of the game. It's part of the strategy. It's part of how you spend.
All right, guys. So that's going to wrap it up for us tonight. Right now we have Wayne G is the big winner. He finally wins a debate show. And I think he's down to like an 84% at this point by now. Self-proclaimed, if you guys didn't know, he was at like a 97% win percentage in debates a while back, and I think we've beat him down a bunch here. But he finally gets a win. So, Wayne, why don't you go ahead and let us know what's going on your show?
Sure. Well, check out Infinity Sports, again, Monday and Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. on our Facebook page, the Infinity Sports Facebook page, or the RTF Sports Facebook page. We are on there live. It's a great show. We do a lot of visual cues. We're still trying to figure out how to transition that live video into a good audio podcast, but we'll figure out eventually. If you do want to listen to the audio podcast, it is on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock on the RTF Sports Network or on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. We're supposed to have Ronnie Fields on today. He's going to come on a different day. Wednesday, we're going to have Coach Scott Fields. He coached with the Utah Jazz and the Golden State Warriors for a few years. So he's going to come on and talk some basketball with us Wednesday. And then next Monday, we have Silk Kozart. So he was in Blue Chips. He was in White Men Can't Jump. He was in 3 to Tango. If you saw his face, you know who he is. We're going to talk to him about being a college athlete on a college scholarship and ask him whether or not Wesley Snipes actually can play basketball, because I heard a rumor he's pretty terrible.
All right. Well, good things going on over there at Infinity Sports. Good things going on here at the RTF Sports Network. We will catch you next week here at 8:15, 7:15 Central Time. And thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next week. Have a good night, guys.
You too. Thanks a lot, man.